This episode of Beyond the Closing is brought to you by First United Land Transfer.
Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Closing. I'm your host, Elena Bilski. Today we're meeting with Asher Schiavone. Asher is the Director of Government Affairs at the GLVR. Now, as we all know, this year is an election year, and on or before November 5th, everyone will have a decision to make. But residents of the city of Allentown have another monumental decision, and it's one that most people don't know much about: transfer tax. But before we get into that, Asher, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on such short notice.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Why don't we start off with a little bit about you? How did you come to the GLVR, and what does the Director of Government Affairs typically entail?
My least favorite subject, talking about myself. So I came to GLVR in early July. I think it was July 8th that I started. And I was over at the city of Bethlehem for 10 years before that, doing economic development related things. And really enjoyed doing that. And I worked with Justin, our CEO, and Allison, who's in our office as well, over at the city. And they had a position open up, which was the Government Affairs Director position. And they asked me if I was interested in joining. And I said, absolutely. I'd love to come over. And they explained what the job entailed, which is advocating for the Realtor Party and the Realtor brand, which, relates to any issues related to realtors or private property rights, which I firmly believe in. So it's very easy for me to advocate for it, meeting with elected officials at the state level as well as local level to, push forward initiatives that are beneficial to our members. And again, I mentioned private property owner rights.
And so that brings us to the ballot question this year, which is the deed transfer referendum.
Right.
Correct. So the question that is being asked this year is, shall Section 807B, Revenue of the Home Rule Charter of the City of Allentown, be amended to allow City Council by ordinance to remove the deed transfer tax? What do you think about this question?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you read it because I think I've heard it about 100 times. I probably could do it from memory just because we've talked about it so much, but that question is as clear as mud. It seems simple on the surface. It's only 28 words. The state allows for 75 words for referendums. So again, it seems like it's direct. It seems like it's clear, but it's not. And WFMZ and Rob Manch, if you're familiar with him, he did a piece a couple of weeks ago where he was actually in downtown Allentown in front of City Hall, and he read the question to people walking by, to potential voters, and he said, "What do you think this means? How would you vote?" And they said, "Oh, I'd vote yes. I want to get rid of the tax." And then he explained to them what it actually meant, which is removing it from the city's home rule charter, thereby giving City Council the administration to raise it to whatever they want. And I think it's important to keep in mind, too, that the deed transfer tax right now is at 2%, which is what we see anywhere in our greater Lehigh Valley region in Lehigh, Northampton, and Carbon counties. So once they were explained that, the voters said, oh, well, I want to change my vote. I want to vote no, which just shows how misleading the referendum was written. And that's why we need to go through this public informational campaign about encouraging voters to vote no. Because in the past, there's been 3 referendums on this already that the City of Allentown put out in the last 22 years. It was in 2002, 2004, and 2005. And voters overwhelmingly voted against it. They voted no every time. But those questions included important context, like, do you want to remove the deed transfer tax and increase it? But it provides no context this time. And so this may seem aggressive. It may seem like we're telling voters how to vote, but we're not. We needed very clear messaging in light of a very unclear referendum. And so our vote no is consistent with how Allentown voters have already voted, and they've already spoken on this issue. And that's why we're encouraging them to vote no on this tax increase.
And so I was curious as to why now and why transfer tax, but it seems like they've already tried putting this through. Why do you think transfer tax again this time, and why this year?
I have no idea. I don't know. We've been trying to figure it out. Like I'm not sure why now. Everybody talks about how tough it is for buyers to buy a house, especially the first-time home buyer, especially low to moderate income individuals. Why is now the right time to do this when the housing market is the way it is? We don't have an answer to that. We don't know. It was rushed through city council. So this wording, this referendum, this idea came from the administration. It came from the Mayor Turk, and it came from Allentown's finance director, Bina Patel. They submitted this to council. We are at city council. It was my second day on the job. I mentioned I started July 8th. Mm-hmm. July 9th, the phone rings, and it's Councilman Santo Napoli giving us the heads up that, hey, there's going to be this referendum question you guys might be interested in. I wanted to give you the courtesy of a heads up, which we certainly appreciate. But this is the third rail issue for our Realtor Association. We don't want the transfer tax touched. We think it should be decreased as it is right now, and they're talking about increasing it again in this market. And so we've been publicly advocating against it at City Council. We tried to tell them, hey, this wording is misleading. If you're going to go forward with this referendum, at least put forward a clearer question and provide more context to voters, because it's all about transparency. So we tried that. When they pushed it through, we went to Lehigh County Board of Elections, where they will come up with a plain English statement for the question so that voters can understand it, and also certify the ballot. So we made the argument that, hey, this question is not transparent. It has voters almost vote opposite of what their intention is, and it should be thrown out. And it was rubber stamped through that, pushed through, and here we are, forced to do this public informational campaign, which we're happy to do because we want to inform the voters, but we tried to iron it out ahead of time so that we didn't have to go forward with the mailers and the yard signs and all of that, which, cat's out of the bag now. Like it is what it is. But we just want to make sure that voters know exactly what they're voting on. So I forget what your original question was, but
why transfer tax and why now?
Yeah. Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea.
And the reason I was asking that is because, and I'm looking again at your website,
okay,
the Home Rule Charter doesn't just involve transfer tax. And it says that the current charter, Section 807B, council shall not raise the rates of the deed transfer, earned income, business privilege, occupational privilege, amusement devices, and resident taxes above their respective 1996 levels. So there's a lot of different types of tax that are involved in this. And so is transfer tax just an easy target?
Well, they've targeted it before, so maybe they think that it's an easy sell. And two, I mean, they push that these funds are going towards affordable housing. The city also said maybe it could be used for blight. On the WFMZ piece, they said, well, maybe it's going to go towards community services. And Mayor Turk put out a video on Facebook a couple days ago, maybe a week ago, and he I believe he mentioned that it might go to the general fund or go to support other services. But the point I'm trying to make is that they have absolutely no idea where the money raised from an increase to the deed transfer tax would go. And so we've had them in to our location, on Commerce Way. We've had Councilman Napoli in, we've had the administration in when this question was being proposed, and we said, give us your plan. Like let us know why you're looking to raise it, what you're going to do with the money, and all those things that I mentioned, blight, affordable housing, they were all mentioned, but there was no concrete plan. There's no mechanism to spend the $2.3 million that they're planning to raise from this increase. There's no plan. And they're publicly advocating now for a 0.5% increase if voters were to vote yes and uncap this tax so the administration and council can raise it.
And is that typical that they don't have a plan? Are they supposed to have a plan before the vote?
Well, there's nothing written in stone that you have to do that, but if you were a taxpayer in the city of Allentown, which I don't know, are you?
I'm not.
Okay.
No, but
Okay, but if you were, whatever municipality you're in, I would want, what are the expenses going to be? What's the program you're going to come up with? How much is it going to cost? And then come to me and say, hey, we need money for this. We could do it through, raising property taxes. We could do it through the D-transfer tax, like whatever that mechanism is to fund it. You come up with the expenses in the program before you raise more money from taxpayers, right? I mean, that's typically how things work, I would think. But in this case, it's, hey, vote yes, unlock this tax. We want to raise it 0.5% for right now, and we'll get into what we think it's gonna raise up to. Sure. And trust us that we'll take care of the money, and trust us that we'll put it to good use. We don't think that's going to happen. We think it's going to go in the general fund, and it'll never be seen again.
Yeah, of course. And once you give that power away, it's hard to take it back.
Well, and you're exactly right. I mean, give an inch, take a mile. Where our fear is that, again, it's at 2% right now. So if you look at the median home sales price in the city of Allentown is $250,000. 2% would be $5,000 at closing. We've seen in other municipalities, Reading, Pittsburgh is at 5%. Philadelphia's at 4.2%.
Yes.
They didn't just go from 2% to 5% overnight. They went from 2 to 2.5, 2.5 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, until they are up to 5. And that takes closing costs at $5,000, at 2%, to now $12,500 at 5%. And talking earlier before we came in here, like $500 could kill,
for a first-time home buyer. Yeah, sure.
Exactly. And so when we're talking about a $7,500 increase potentially, I mean, there's no telling where this is going to stop. And where I get that from is the finance director for the city of Allentown had a public document where the D-transfer tax was all the way up to 5%. And that's, as you know, 1% goes to the state, and then 1% right now is split between the city and the school district. Mm-hmm. She had projections all the way up to 3.5% for the city, and how much revenue that would generate. And so when you add in 0.5% for the school district and 1% for the state, that gets you up to 5%. So they're not just thinking about a 0.5% increase. They're thinking about more than that. They're thinking about getting up to a total of 5% total D-transfer tax, which would make, housing in Allentown less affordable, which is a losing issue. And again, I don't understand why they're going after the D-transfer tax. I don't get it.
Yeah, and is there any indication as to when those increases would occur? Right away, I imagine for 5.5% or the 0.5%.
I'm guessing it'll be as soon as the election's over. They'll probably put an ordinance forward, in which we will be there publicly advocating, obviously, against it, and even calling for a decrease. Since the mayor mentioned, well, if the voters unlock it, city council could increase it or decrease it, which we know they're not going to decrease it. They're going to increase it, But yeah, so it'll probably happen right away, I would imagine.
And is there any recourse once, if the voters do vote yes, because they don't know what they're voting for, or because maybe they really do want the transfer tax to change, but is there much recourse for you to fight against an increase?
There is. Up to this point, I mean, we've talked in a lot of detail about the policy, like why is the D-transfer tax increase bad? And we can argue about that until we're blue in the face. But our number one issue has always been the wording, has always been we want voters to understand what it means, because this referendum that needs a plain English statement to be understood is not a good referendum. So that's the number one issue that we're hammering home, because nobody that I've found has said, yeah, that's a clear and concise question. I completely understand it. Other than the city saying it's a clear and straightforward question, which it's not. But if it were to come to that, if this were to pass, we would obviously not be focusing on the misleading language anymore. We'd be focusing on the policy and the fact that there is no plan to spend this money. I think residents have gotten our mailers. Our mailers have gone to, pretty much every registered voter in the city of Allentown. They've gotten 9 mailers, or will get 9 mailers by the time the campaign is done. And so they're aware of this issue. Our realtors will go out to a restaurant or something and they'll say, hey, I know you're a realtor. Like, thanks for sending me the mailer, because this question is misleading. Mm-hmm. So our hope is that residents would come to city council and advocate for either putting it back in the charter, which I don't even know if that's possible at that point, or just not, going forward with an increase.
And so that's the recourse, is people have to come to city council.
Yeah, because like property taxes, they would have to approve an increase. Same thing with the detransfer tax. City council would have to approve an increase.
And most people probably don't want to take time out of their day. They have work, they have other obligations, and
sure.
I'm sure that's pretty difficult to get people to go.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. We'll be there. Our realtors will be there like they always have. And I want to make a point, which I haven't yet. This also impacts renters as well, because if developers or investors come in, which they are in Allentown and in other areas, and they have an increased cost of business up front with the higher tax due to the detransfer, they're not just going to eat that cost and cut into their bottom line. They're going to pass that cost on to the tenants through increased rent. And I've talked to prominent developers in the city of Allentown that have confirmed that we'll just pass this on to the tenants. Not because they want to, but they're obviously in it to make money as well.
It's a business.
It's a business, which completely understand. They're adding housing stock to the city, which is great at all levels. I think we can agree.
Of course.
The focus is on affordable, but you need the high end. You need, I know there's condos going in downtown Allentown. We'll see what happens with that, but you need housing across all levels. So that's great that they're doing those projects. But again, cost of business goes up, rental rates are going to go up. And with Allentown being majority renters, I want to make sure that renters know that this impacts them as well.
Yeah, of course. And we see rents going up. I mean,
right.
Over the last couple of years, now it's more affordable to buy a house almost than continue renting in many cases. Yeah. So I think you already answered it, but specifically when it comes to first-time home buyers, how do you see this impacting them? And how do you see it impacting the realtors of the GLVR?
Well, being 3 months in, I don't have as great of a handle as our realtors do, and as I'm sure you guys do. I know you guys do, because we were just talking about it outside, that $500 at closing could kill a deal. And when we're talking about a 1% increase to the detransfer tax, if that's what it is, that's another $2,500 in the city of Allentown. So between the buyer and the seller, it's another couple thousands of dollars. So that might kill a deal for a first-time home buyer. But I really look to our realtors. Our realtors have gone to city council and talked about those stories where their clients can't afford that increase.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having us.
Yep. That was another episode of Beyond the Closing. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.